Teacher, trainer, instructor, coach, parent. What are we exactly to our dogs? Are we owners, guardians, or handlers? Gosh, the labels go on, and each of those titles matters, yes. But ultimately, we are people who create environments to allow learning to happen. Kay Laurence and Sue McGuire on Learning About Dogs, and in this episode, we talk about who are we to our dogs. Training. Gosh, sometimes I run across people who get all, lack of a better term, maybe you'll recognize this one, nigger twisted over the term training. And is that term accurate? Are we dog trainers? Are we dog teachers? I don't know where I'm going
Oh,
with this.
I wish we weren't trainers.
Why?
You know, well, when we brought out the magazine 15 years ago, it was called Teaching Dogs. It's a little bit like saying, teaching tends to have a rather superior sort of feel because you teach children and you have a rounded education, which covers things like social skills and personal development, as well as geography and maths and science and all the rest of it. And training tends to be the specialized thing where you're training a dog to do an indicator or to halt at a curb or to retrieve, which seems to be very limited in a dog's scope of what they actually learn. A canine education is as broad as a child's education.
Hmm,
So, do we say that parents don't teach? Yes, of course they do.
yes.
But that's called parenting, that's not called teaching. So, probably teaching is a niche, specialized area where there's a structure that society wants to ensure that our children learn certain basic education to get further to where they're to be able to be useful members of society. Well, you could say exactly the same about dogs. Yeah. Where we have to teach them how to adapt what they what are their innate skills to be able to live in our societies. And our societies have ground rules that are acceptable for dogs, and it varies from one society to another. So if I move 2 miles down the road, what's acceptable in our village is not acceptable or not useful in the middle of a farm, and what's acceptable in the middle of London is not of any use to a dog on a farm. So your society would have a certain set of basic fundamental expectations of how to behave so that we can all live together. So, teaching, training, coaching, instructing, they all have to be the same thing, where you're enabling learning. And that's what it should revolve around, not what the teacher's teaching, but what is the learner learning. Now, the learner will learn different things of different situations. So, if a child is learning from a math teacher, they're learning something different than if they're learning off a woodwork teacher. You know, so academic teaching might differ from practical skills of teaching, which might differ from learning how to cross a road or learning how to knit. Do you knit?
I do.
Do you remember learning how to knit?
I do. Very
And who
slowly and
taught you? Was
painfully.
Well, that was a family thing that was taught you. Or was that at school?
Actually, it was with a group of college friends.
Oh,
It
right.
was something we did.
Way after school days, yes.
Yes, yes.
No, my mother sat down and taught me. I was probably 6 or 7, and because I'm left-handed, that went down like a ton of bricks. So we sat in front of a mirror doing it, so I could see the reverse version of what she's doing. Because she holds the knitting needle like a pencil.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you can actually let go. Yada yada yada. So she couldn't possibly work it out with me holding. Yeah. Anyway, left-handed, right-handed. So there's certain skills that tend to be learnt within the family environment, certain skills that are you learning off your peers, and certain skills that you learn in a structured school environment. And school might go on to other things, and then you go to work environments and you learn something there. So it's quite selfishly centered about us. Are we trainers of dogs, or are we facilitators of their learning? Let's turn it around the other way. So when do the dogs learn? So the dogs learn from their siblings.
Hmm.
They will learn from adult dogs in their environment. They will learn from the environment, like don't try and run across a slippery floor because you'll end up on your chin. They will learn how to read the wind. And our role is pretty much how to set them up to learn life skills, which is to be able to be suitable for the environment they live in. But then I think training is like the equivalent of teaching in children is specialized skills for specific outcomes. So we might be teaching guide dogs, search and rescue dogs, sports dogs. And I think that is sort of the niche training where you are building definite pathways over many months, which are complex behaviors. Does that sound sort of rightish? Training?
Well, I do like that approach because I think that for me particularly, I've struggled with, um, you know, what am I? What am I to my dogs? You know, and
Well, you're parent and trainer.
uh,
I mean, same as somebody who's a school teacher, she's also a parent to her children.
mhm.
So, and even if you're teaching 15 and 16-year-olds, you still have a certain amount of parenting to do. I'm going to tell you a nice, nasty story now.
Oh, about you? Oh,
No, no, no.
oh,
So I was teaching in college, which you would call community colleges, 17, 18-year-olds, not going on to do anything academically strenuous, but still needing to learn um, diploma type skills. Agriculture type college, this was at, and the kids had to learn computer skills because they were going into life today. So at that time, everybody was coming in with various piercings all over their body, and it was a big trend. And the one thing you can say about teaching computer technology is if they've got a cold, they're not sneezing towards you, they're sneezing on top of their own computer, which is absolutely fine by me. But you stand behind these kids and they're snorting and sniffling and snuffling and So I got out a tissue and passed it over, and he said, "Thanks, Mum," or something like that. Yeah, 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 yeah. And he couldn't blow his nose because he had a ring in his nose.
okay.
Yeah, so I'm going, okay, well, take the ring out then. So he took the ring out, and put it on the desk. Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Snorted, and the snot came out of his hole. I would never have guessed that was going to happen. So yes, we parent as well. Here's a tissue. Yeah, so
Cover
it's
the whole nose,
yes,
all the
exactly. Make
holes.
sure you block the right holes when you snort. So, yeah, that again, could a teacher ever separate the role if you're teaching young people? Could you ever separate the roles from some degree of parenting, some degree of teaching that child or that person how to become what they need for their personal development, which again happens in businesses. Personal development is the responsibility of the business.
Mm.
Are you getting better at your job for the benefit of the company or for the benefit of that individual person?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of the trainers we probably mix with are just fascinated by the process of what can we actually set up for a dog to learn? Like, can they distinguish between largest and smallest? Well, yes, of course they can, because if you're going to kill something, you're going to kill the easiest one, which might be the smallest. Yes, can they distinguish between the fastest and the slowest? Well, yes, because that's an innate skill, because the one you want to kill is the slowest. But the slowest might be the biggest, so you've got to choose between the slowest and the biggest and the fastest and the smallest, depending on which one you're going to be more successful on. So they have to have these abilities to be able to do these comparisons, which may come from experience, but we all know people or have taught dogs ourselves. Can you detect a pile of bricks, which is the biggest pile and which is the smallest pile? Yes. To be able to teach that, we have to have a lot of teaching skills to be able to set up their skills to be able to reply to us when we say which is the largest, which is the smallest, or which is the fastest, or which is the slowest. So our particular training fascination is about what can we set up for a dog to learn, which to me is not can we adjust or set it up that a dog selects to do certain behavioral skills and not others. I'm thinking in behavior modification. So if you've got a dog that's in your humane situation that's very, very fearful, is that training or is that just setting up the environment to actually condition the dog to have different responses? I personally don't call that training.
It's an interesting, yeah, yeah. I think I do.
It's a big muddy area.
It is a muddy area because I think people get kind of a little anal retentive about the whole term of training, teaching. I there was one of our fellow colleagues sent me this quote from a blog post, and she said, "We need coaches, mentors, and cornermen. A coach helps you master a specific skill and reach a specific outcome. A mentor
Hmm.
helps you succeed in a specific domain. Cornerman is someone who has accumulated a lot of experience and who is cheering you on your journey. We need all three in our lives." And I thought that
Huh.
was kind of an interesting way to look at it. So if we were to turn that onto dogs, sometimes we're three of those, not necessarily the cheering you on kind of
Hmm.
thing,
Hmm.
but perhaps that's more of a description of keeping them safe, um, protecting them, having their backs, etc. Kind of an interesting.
Yeah, it's the same as, if a dog is part of your life, then you'd play the same three roles as you would for a family member.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I do think people tend to think training is something that you do when you chop up the treats, you sit down and you're going to train the dog to do A, B, and C. Yes, and it gets a little bit better each day, and then you can say, I've taught that, I've finished it. Well, you never finish it.
No,
Learning never finishes, and just as easily when you're going through a doorway, you're also training at that moment, but the training is a lot less intense. So if we say, let's forget it from our centric point of view and turn it around to the dog. So the dog is always learning. But then how do I identify when learning's happening? So when are we learning? We're learning when we're probably attentive on what we're doing.
the
I think they
focus.
call it active learning.
Yes. Uh
Yeah.
huh.
But you can drive a car and there's a stage to which you're not learning the journey or the car because your mind is not actively engaged in what you're doing. So I would not say you're learning because you could be driving the car listening to my podcast
Let's hope they
and you
are.
might be adjusting how you view something. You're learning something on a cognitive level because something is new, but that's not affecting the way you drive. So your driving is not in a learning state,
No.
but your mind is actively engaged on something. Learning will happen. So if I've got a dog that's say I have a secondhand dog that came here in the middle of the summertime, as she goes through the next 6 months into winter, there's new things to learn because we do different things depending on the weather. We do different things at different times of the year, and we're surrounded by different stock at different times of the year. So from 1 month to the next, there's always something learning happening, like how do we go through this gateway? Well, you don't go through this gateway at all when this happens, but when this happens, you can go through this gateway. So she's adjusting her behavior because she's actively engaged in working out what the difference is between the environment when she can do this and the environment when she can't do that. So she is learning.
Hmm.
So at that time she is learning, I am in a position to be her teacher, trainer, parent, mentor, coach, and all the rest of it in one.
Hmm.
Yep, I'm setting it up and I have to be aware of what she's learning. And I think that's the danger area. So if the dog is half learning, so say we've got full learning, we take them into our training area. This is the area where there's nothing else going on at all. My setup is the other dogs are out. I've chopped up some treats. In the winter, they'll come into the kitchen and I might put some music on if I'm training her to do Heelworks music, or I might put an object on the floor if she's learning where to place her feet. So there's something about the environment that tells her, well, I'm going to give this all of my attention because there's going to be a high rate of great food coming quite fast, and I want to be able to earn that food. And I've had to teach her how to learn in that environment. So that was part of the early processes. So now she recognizes the environment and she is full on engaged with me at that time, and we'll go through repetitions, maybe 100, 120 things. She learns something and then she goes to race around the garden. And then I swap over to the next dog. So she has lots of environmental cues that says this is full on 100% learning. But then I might also have some treats in the garden and we're practicing some protocols for when we get deliveries.
Hmm.
And that is what I call 50% learning, where she's aware of other things in the environment that demand her attention. So I'm only getting about 50% of it. But the bit I do get, I would like to set up that when delivery vans come around the corner, I have the best reinforcement available. I've got the rewards. So is she learning in that environment? Sure.
Sure.
What happens is she hears the delivery van coming. She starts to look at me to see if I've got some chicken. Well, yes, I have. There we go. So that needed to be set up that those two outcomes occurred at the same time. You ignore the delivery vans or the tractors or the hedge cutters or whatever's happening. And when those things happen, I will probably have something better on offer, which is the same as if you're taking your dogs for a walk on the beach. At that time, there's a whole bunch of other things that are pretty damn cool.
Mm-hmm.
But under those conditions, you also have some pretty good rewards. So you are a 50% teacher, if you like. You're half there and half the environment. But I think we had a situation where somebody came with a very young puppy to one of our weekend workshops. I think it was about 10, 12 weeks old. And this puppy was allowed to walk into the room and was greeted by everybody because the person was a key member of that group. So, if I walk in with a new puppy, everyone's all over it because I'm a known person and they're likely to think, oh, we can have a cuddle. Well, look at my face. No, you're not. So after the first of the morning, I think the puppy had gone in and out probably 4 or 5 times. And I could see by lunchtime that puppy's coming in. And as it came through the doors, it totally dismissed the owner because it was looking for all this social approval from all the people in the room.
Sure.
And when it came back in and I was talking, lecturing, everyone was paying attention to me. So it started bouncing up and down and squealing. Yes, and nobody was paying attention to it. So you can see, what has that dog learned? Walk through doors into a room full of dog trainers, and everyone will say, oh, lovely, come have a cuddle, isn't it great? Treats, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time it's learning that, it's also learning that the owner is secondary to that environment. Bad news. The next time it came in, after the 3rd or 4th repetition, you could see that's what it was expecting, and it didn't happen. So it had nothing left to do but just like, I don't understand. Squealing, jumping, bouncing up and down. Oh, she's so naughty. So while everyone else was busy on an exercise, I sat down with the owners. I said, you first, strangers second, friends third. Because friends in dog training classes, pain in the ass. The worst place probably to socialize a dog is a dog training class because everyone's familiar with dogs.
Yeah.
So, yes, under those conditions, I would say, no, me and this dog come first. Once I know that I can orientate the dog to me without any stress or any difficulty, then she can say hello to people. But at any time I want to say, right at this moment, we need to go, are you coming? I want her to be 50% aware of me, 50% aware of the other people in the room. So being aware that there's more than one piece of learning happening at the same time. So, if they're going towards B, they're leaving A. Sometimes which is the bit you want them to learn? Well, they're learning both at the same time. So like we've been working on the dogs coming away from a pot of treats on the, that's available over on the table, and they're coming towards you, we would mark them for coming towards us. But probably the important bit is what they're coming away from.
Exactly.
Which is the same as when you want the dog to be out and about in a public environment and off lead. We say we're training the dog to come, but in actual fact, are we training the dog to leave something else? So what's the dog learning? In that environment, I want at least 50% of your focus to me, so that should something come up that I need to ask you to leave, to come away from that badger hole, the rat's running over there. Oh, God, we caught another rat last night.
Right on. There's more where that came from.
This border collie can catch rats. I think she's up to about 4 rats and 2 squirrels at the moment.
Ooh.
You'd think they'd learn by now.
Does she eat them?
No. I get presented. She just shakes them and just dumps them on the mat.
Fun's over.
Cat,
yeah. How'd you teach her to put it on the mat? Just kidding.
Yes. How do you teach her that? Well, the environment. Yeah. So it's this complex thing of what do you want the dog to learn, and the culture of dog training is always about what the person wants, not necessarily what's for the benefit of the dog.
Exactly.
So this person coming into the room with this young puppy Did she get pleasure from her young puppy being very popular and friendly with everybody in the room?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Was that to the benefit of the dog,
Mm.
not at a cost of the relationship to
Right.
her?
Right.
So to me, I would have put the priority is relationship with the person. Once that is sound, and that can be sound within a week of ownership,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to you don't have to work on that for months, or it may take months. Yes, but what I wouldn't want is my dogs having social skills with people and other dogs at an expense of their relationship with me or my ability to manage them in the environment.
I think that you said something very, very important in that how many of us have come across trainers who expect their dogs to pay attention only to them. And, and I love how you said that 50-50, you know.
Well, you decide the environment. Some environments, I'm quite happy for when my dogs belt out into the field, especially when Merrick was a youngster. I don't get more than 5% within the first 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But then it gradually increases. Yes, over the time, because I would set it up. This is an orchard that I can run the dogs around. And what I'd do is I would have left her toy in a tree over the far side of the orchard. So I know as a young 18-month-old dog, she needs to run. And Zip is the same. They need to get this physical exercise of running. Okay, you go blast around. It's safe for you to do so. It's a fence field. Blast away, run it out. Cool, 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 cool. When you've done the blasting around, we'll play a game.
Mm-hmm.
So the completing of the blasting around ends up with us doing stuff. So that blasting around starts to get less and less valuable because doing stuff with me starts to get more rewarding, more valuable to them. And you can see the blasting is almost minimal, that they
Yeah.
just tend to do it as a gesture.
Yeah.
And then they orientate straight to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't expect that first blasting around. Could I have stopped the dog at those moments?
Mm-mm. Mm.
Possibly.
Yeah.
5
Mm-hmm.
10% chance. Yeah. But now in the fields, I have and as the circuit around the field starts to finish and we head towards the gate, you can see I never need to call them. They know that it's ending. They self-end it. We come in the garden and we go in and get breakfast. The
Oh,
timing's excellent.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Ah.
So, at that point, I'm 100% on there, because I'm going back towards the house where they're going to get food. So, what starts off as maybe a 5% focus to me, especially when they're youngsters, over time becomes a starting of 20, 25%, but all of it ends up in 100%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Time.
particularly valuable, some of them are getting a bit old now and they're deaf.
Mm.
So they tend to go on a mission across the field in one direction. And I don't stand any chance of calling them. So we're having to go back to a little bit of this. Every time you look at me, you can come back and get a treat. So I get a lot more deliberate look here. Oh, she's got some food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to keep them in touch with me a bit more because they can get off
Mm-hmm.
on track a little bit.
So sometimes we're trainers, sometimes we're coaches.
Yep.
When are you a coach to your dog? Just like in the scenario you were talking about?
I was working on trying to teach Merrick foot placement. Now, the collies come with exquisite foot placement, seems to be built in. Merrick, goodness me, those feet. It wasn't really a life skill for a dog that's going to run across moorland where there's no trees. There's nothing to run into. You just run. So why would you need to learn where to put your feet?
Hmm.
But if you are having to chase small rats, yeah, where they're in and out of buildings, up and down, up and down, up and down, you'd come with exquisite proprioception abilities to actually know exactly where and how to turn. So things like the Gordon setters, I was watching some of our neighbours have lurchers, which is sort of greyhound collie cross thing, and I watched this dog take off after some hare we have in the big fields. Didn't catch them, but when she changed direction on those hare, I was like, oh my gosh, it was so exquisite. Her ability to actually turn 90 degrees in midair, and I could see how she could easily have been used for catching running things. Even the collies can't do that. The Gordon setter, hare pops up, starts to run after it. Oh gosh, it's just changed direction. She's carried on 30 foot before she can actually learn to change direction. So she's more like a tanker. She's not a light sailing skiff at all. It takes a long time for the message to come to brain and then the actual body to change its momentum and turn around and go another way. So teaching her foot placement, the difference between standing on something, standing in something, and avoiding something. And I was trying to work on that to teach her, and it was laborious. No two ways about it. I'm coaching her. Yep, you can do this, and you can. Oh, there we go again. Let's try again. So it was trying to find more ways to set it up that she could teach herself the differences between those three things: standing in, standing on, and standing around. Yeah, walking around things. Because it was, in actual fact, I've videoed it 3 times now. Yes, there's a certain degree of learning happening, but nothing like to the skill level that the collie got within a third of the training time. Even the frigging chicken can do it. So there am I coaching her, by altering the environment so that she changes the skill she's learning at that moment.
Is it
It's
just
not verbal. I mean, coaching comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You can do it by physical contact.
facilitator?
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
I don't know why I'm getting
We're
it.
facilitators. We set it up for dogs to learn, and the skill of the trainer is we set it up for dogs to learn extremely fine skills in a very specific field. So somebody who teaches a musical instrument, goodness me, they are training the hands to work in a certain way at a certain time at a certain rate on a certain stimulus. That's closest to me to a trainer. Sports coaches are nearly what's called trainers because it's very much that focused breakdown of small sections of bigger skills that we build up later on. And being able to give feedback as and just move your little finger tiny bit that way and just raise your hand a bit more as you do that. So that's the coaching thing, and that's, I think, the trainer viewpoint, that we're coming from a place where we can actually know where our learner is trying to go to, as opposed to first-time parents where you just hope that you're just teaching them the same way we learned. This is how you read. Well, even looking back at how we learned to read and write, there's probably a significant amount of changes have happened over years that you wouldn't teach a child the same way necessarily now.
No.
Knitting.
Teaching of math. Math teaching. Very different.
I don't know. That's swinging back a bit. I mean, yeah, that's swinging back a bit. Because I was one of these kids, about 9 or 10, they were experimenting with teaching with modern maths. It's about the 1960s, modern maths. And they taught us with colours. So there's even colours and odd colours and bar lengths of different things. So you visualise maths as opposed to actually crunch numbers. And my father's an accountant. He went up the damn wall when he found out about this. Took me out that class straight away. But it still lasts. I still see odd colours and even colours
in numbers.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I can do what they call pure maths without any difficulty, but applied maths, not so easy. But how do you teach English grammar? It's construction of sentences. That seems to be a lost skill these days, isn't it? Well, there was something on the television the other day, and I was watching the end of one program, the start of another. This is on the BBC, and whoever was doing the commentating for what these people had done said, "Ain't she done well?"
Oh, Lord.
And I'm like, oh my goodness me, where do they find them? Ain't she done well? Because she got some prize or something. And this is like peak time, 7 o'clock on a Saturday evening.
I know. Sometimes I feel like all I do is throw dirty socks at my television screen sometimes, going, no, that's a singular.
Yeah. But I remember my mother doing it with our children's televisions. She hated the phrase, these ones. It's these, not these ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, those ones.
Those ones.
If you move those ones over there, no, those. And she would get all itchy-tickety about that. So, yes, I'm not like to forget that. So was learning happening? Absolutely. But I still wrote could have instead of could have. So she didn't get that one quite right for me.
Oh, no. Yeah. Contractions are okay. Although Word doesn't like contractions. Why doesn't Word like contractions? I think that's such an interesting thing. It does not like it's, like it is.
Anyway. But it depends which one it is, doesn't it?
It does, but it still doesn't like other one. Yeah.
Well, I switched off the grammar on Word a long time ago. You're not telling me how to write
Oh,
grammar.
I like to do it because it challenges me. Ha! Wrong.
There's certain things that it wants to join together as a word that
Yeah.
aren't, to me, need to be separate words. Yeah.
Yeah. To our dogs, does it make any difference, really? I mean, this is just a human construct, this coach, mentor, teacher,
I
facilitator.
think, well, what's the information they need? Should I be paying 100% attention or just 10% attention?
And is that totally driven by the environment, do you think? Us being, of course, part of the environment.
It's probably coming off a whole range of things. So if we get very intensely engaged, do we need the scent of the potential food rewards?
Hmm.
Is that part of it? I mean, personally, I don't carry food much at all. Yep, if I'm going to train with food, because Merrick's such a good snorter of food and clothing, that if I took her out into the orchard with food in my pocket, she's just a pain in the ass. You know, she just hounds me all the way around. She just walks backwards around the orchard. Not
That's a
much
good
use when there's trees in there, you know. So I don't tend to wear food. That killed that habit quite quickly. If I've got to take the oldies out and I need a treat for them, it absolutely has been a plastic bag, so she can't smell that I've got something on board. So, do I use the scent of food as a cue that this is a chance of 100% training because I have the best food option or best reward option at this moment in time? That's a strong cue. I probably get a little excited. Yep.
Yeah.
I certainly probably, get busy. There's a busyness about what I'm doing that would indicate to the dog that something's about to happen. Oh my God, you're going to cut my toenails. No! Because it has the similar ring to it, you know? Oh. As opposed to I might be gardening and I suddenly find an old toy under a hedge and we go for a play. That's more of a spontaneous one. So yeah, they're probably keeping an eye on us most of the time to see at any time when top rewards are going to come out. Top rewards and top training go together.
Yeah, watching us. Are you going to do anything interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to the border collies that keep chucking the stuff at me saying, you are going to do something interesting because here's the ball again.
Yes.
No, I'm digging. Go away.
Yeah.
But they also need to know when we're busy.
Yes, they
No,
do.
at the moment I'm busy. You need to go and do nothing with me. You need to be nearby, potential, but not actual active engagement.
Yes. Yes, that's so incredibly important to tell your dogs. Not now. Not
Works both
now.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very much environment. So if I, having had up to a half a dozen collies at any one time, you never play games in the sitting room. Never, ever, ever, ever. And if a guest even thinks about just one toss of that toy, they won't come to the house again. No, don't do that.
Or you won't have
Just
a
don't do it.
sitting room. Oh.
No, exactly. Because if one collie starts to work, the other five got to do it as well.
Mm.
And having lived with a collie that worked the television, yeah, no, if I were to sit down in the evening, I do not want to be playing. And I wouldn't be playing in the evenings.
Yeah. So important.
It's quiet time.
So important.
Yeah, and if the dogs want to play in the sitting room with each other, I suggest they go outside and do that.
Yeah.
So that environment is very much when we tip in here, it's a question of who's going to get all the sofa first. And if I look like I'm going in and I put the coffee down, I go back out of the room to go and get something else. By the time I come back, all the sofa's gone.
Missed your
Full
opportunity.
of dogs. Yes.
You need to get chihuahuas.
And you can see 3 of them fit on there quite happily, and when the 4th is just climbing up. And I put my hands on my hips and said, really? And you can see them all, yeah, we're comfortable, fine. I don't know where you're sitting. And it's not like they roll their eyes at each other, go, it's your turn to get out, let her in. So, yeah, they're spending all their time studying us to see what we're doing, to see what's in it for them, to see the potential, it's time for a rest. Yeah, it's time for food. Yeah.
It's
they look for patterns in our habits to predict what's likely to happen.
so sometimes we're not necessarily an overt teacher, but that does not mean that
We're not teaching.
We're not teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, but being a teacher may be that formal. At this moment in time, I'm going to train you. I think the sticky stuff comes when you're in a class, i.e., you are one of the students in a class, you are training your dog, and a coach or instructor or teacher comes over to teach you how to do something with your dog. So you flip from the dog's point of view between being their teacher, but suddenly you stop teaching them to be a student to the instructor of the class. Now, at that point in time, the dog's going, am I still learning or can I take a break?
Yeah.
And you need to be crystal clear. And you could see it almost, so I'd have the barn full of people, 8 people are training their dogs, and I'm wandering around from one to the next. So the dogs pretty much get the habit. If I'm going around the room clockwise, they will start to look to me when I'm on the person before their turn. And they'll pretty much stop training or focusing on their person as I come towards them, because as I come towards them, their person starts to behave in the most peculiar fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Either they get terribly nervous, or they get overexcited, or they suddenly disengage from their dog and start talking to me.
Yeah.
So you'll see this displacement behavior happening in advance of me coming to them to do some coaching for their person. So I think under those conditions, I would actually teach people to say, okay, I'm going to walk around the room from one to another of you. Under no reason do you stop training, to stop the dogs anticipating that me walking up meant training's ending.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I'd walk around the room. Don't you look at me. Don't you dare look at me. Keep training your dog. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. I'm just walking around with a radio. Don't look at me. And I'm just bouncing. I'm not doing anything interesting. This is nothing to do, and just to get the dogs to not immediately start to stop training as I approach, or get confused, or shut down, or get overexcited. So those conditions, I definitely want to. We're in our training mode. Any minute we could go back into training, but for the moment, I need you to take a break. You can watch what the other dogs are doing while the adults talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we'd put the dogs into park, or we'd hitch them up, or you put them back in the crate.
Yes.
They need that clear difference between being 100% focused to you and what you're trying to explain to them. Why did I get food for that, but not for that? What's the difference between this? What's the difference between that? And then suddenly you're on the phone. Oh, okay. Should I keep trying to work on this, or would you like me to take a break? I don't know. And what happens is the dogs then will just start to take breaks when you're in the middle of training, because
Exactly.
they've got no clear definition when it's time to take a break and when it's not.
That's how rude. Your dog's going, how rude.
Yes, it is. Well, it's not fair on them. I know some people like their dogs to always give them this full attention and, other old habits.
Mm-hmm.
I personally find the dog that's always got attention on you, if you've ever lived with collies, you just don't want it, because you just end up being the sheep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've got one at the moment that's full attention on me, and it's like, go and look at something else. Okay.
Yeah.
So I teach her, when we go from one room to another, I use the cue, walk on, which means turn your back on me and carry on.
Yeah.
And it's actually turned out to be one of the most useful things, because otherwise she starts working me when I'm in the orchard. Walk on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, off you go. And she'll find something out there to do. It really means just piss off.
Yeah, it does.
Go.
It does. But it with my collie girl, I do notice this relaxation. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have to worry about what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I suppose in a way that's what their innate responses would be. They're naturally inwardly focused. They're the boundary dog on the outside, but they're focused in towards us all the time.
Exactly.
Whereas a lot of the other herding breeds are on the boundary, focused outwards to protect him.
Mm-hmm.
So the collies are very much, mine would be happy enough to go for an entire 2-hour hike backwards. Yeah, because at any moment I might just burst into training.
I might do something. You might do something. Need to pay attention. Yes, yes.
Yeah. And if I don't, they'll find a stone to just keep dropping in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Do something human. Yeah. Teacher, trainer, instructor, coach, parent, handler, owner, guardian. Yeah, we're all of those. For more information and links to articles and courses, be sure to look at the episode notes. I want to point out there's a really interesting course coming up in March called Training Beyond and Above. It's an online course, and I think you're going to like it. Tell a friend, fellow trainer, dog person, parent, coach, take a listen to the podcast and give us a rating on Apple iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening.